Good morning. Today we look at chapters 28 and 29 of the book of Deuteronomy. And chapter 28 is the concluding chapter of Moses' second speech to the Israelites, and chapter 29 is the first chapter of the third speech that Moses gives as they're ready to enter the promised land. And as he concludes this second speech in the first 14 verses of chapter 28, he talks about the blessings that the Israelites will receive from God if and when, biggest deal is if they follow him, if they listen to his words. You know, it starts, if you will only obey the Lord your God by diligently observing these commands that the Lord is blessing you with, I, the Lord, will set you high above all nations, and all of these blessings will come to you, and they will overtake you. I mean, the blessings will come and overtake you. I mean, it isn't, he's just not going to give them. It's like, Psalm 23, some of the experts say that it's, rather than surely goodness and mercy shall follow you, it's surely goodness and mercy shall pursue you with, that God will chase you down with these blessings, and that God wants to give them to you so badly that, he's seeking you out and wanting to give you these blessings. So, if you obey the law, then I, the Lord your God, will set you high above all the nations of the earth, and all of these blessings will come to you if you obey the Lord your God. So in those first two verses, it's the promise of all of these blessings, but twice, if, that little two-letter word that puts it all there. It's just like, in verse 15, as we go from the blessings to the curses, it's but. There's a change that's happening, it's, and so these first verses, it's, you blessed will you be in the city and blessed in the field. Blessed will be the fruit of your womb, the fruit of the ground, the fruit of your livestock. The blessings are just, I was going to say countless, but if you go through there and you'll be able to count them, there's no question about that. But when we get to verse 7, the Lord will cause your enemies who rise against you to be defeated. They will come against you as one, and they will flee in 7 ways. Your enemies are going to be scattered. There's going to be chaos because you're going to be so overpowering to them that they won't be able to stand against you. And, it's just, these other peoples will come against God's chosen people and scatter. And this is what happens as the Israelites come into the promised land. That's the armies of the Israelites are able to overpower them and totally annihilate them, as God says. And as we continue to read on through the Old Testament, God says, take your army and then, do this and this and this. And you get down to just a few men that go to battle and are very successful. So it's just, another one of those blessings that the other nations will respect you. They will look at you and want to be like you. And this is what we as Christians are to be as well, that we are to be a light to these others so that they see who we are and how we live, and they will want to come to know Jesus as we do. Verse 9 of chapter 28, the Lord will establish you as his holy people, as he has sworn to you if you keep the commandments of the Lord your God and walk in his ways. As God has promised, he will take you to be his people. He will establish you as his holy people. And that's, these laws are, these rules are all in effect so that the people know how they can live a holy life with God. And I remember saying that a few times, especially the introduction to the book of Leviticus, is that, this is how you should live so that you will be holy to God. You'll be acceptable in his ways. And it's, God has promised you these things if you keep his commandments. All the people of the earth will see that you are called by the name of the Lord, and they will be afraid of you. Not only that, but, they will respect and want to be like you. And this is, you will be a light to the other nations, a lamp unto their paths, bring them all to God. And verse 13, the Lord will make you the head, not the tail. You're going to be the leaders. You're going to be the ones out front with everybody wanting to follow and be like you. You'll be at the top and not the bottom if you obey the word of the Lord. And that, that little word "if" is in there so many times. And it's, like when Satan tempted Jesus, if you are the Son of God, command these stones. If you are the Son of God, command, it's such a little word, but it's got such big conditions. It's such a big conditional word it is. And the last part of this blessing, if you do not turn aside from the words of the Lord that I am commanding you, either to the right or the left, and follow the gods and to serve them. This is the promise of God, that he's going to give you all these blessings. He's going to give you the promised land. He's going to continue to lead and guide, and you're going to have the magic touch, the golden finger, the green thumb, whatever it is you want to talk about. And then verse 15, it's but if you will not obey the Lord your God by observing all of these, which I am commanding you, then all of these curses will be upon you. And, the curses, take a few more verses than the blessings, because he's spelling them out a little bit more that way. Like when you get to 38, you shall carry much seed into the field, but gather little in, for the locusts will consume it. Verse 25, I'll go backwards a little bit. The Lord will cause you to be defeated against your enemies. You will go in as one and flee before them as seven in 7 ways. Rather than your enemies will come against you as one and they will flee in 7 ways. No, it's going to be you, the Israelites, that will be scattered, and your run will be chaotic. And so then we have later on we're going to come to the diaspora, they call it, the dispersion of the Israelites. So they're no longer in Israel, but they're scattered throughout, the existing worlds of the day, the existing lands, and because we know they don't follow. Verse 45 of chapter 28, all these curses shall come upon you, pursuing and overtaking you until you are destroyed. And remember that, God will give you, and these blessings will overtake you. Well, no, the curses too can overtake you because you did not observe the Lord your God. And then verse 47, because you did not serve the Lord your God joyfully and with gladness of hearts, you shall serve your enemies. You will again be slaves as you were slaves in Egypt, as your ancestors were slaves in Egypt. And, these people that Moses is speaking to now are they're not the ones that fled from Egypt 40 years ago. That generation has all passed away. And it's just like with the Passover. We remember that we were slaves in Egypt. And you will be again if you do not serve me. And we know that this happened. The Babylonians conquered them, the Romans, and how many times that they find themselves not free people. Verse 58, if you do not diligently observe all the words of this law, fearing the glorious and welcome name of the Lord your God, then the Lord will overwhelm both you and your offspring with severe and lasting afflictions and grievous and lasting maladies. He will bring back all of those diseases that there were in Egypt. It's just, God promises protection, life, health, wealth, happiness, if you follow and listen to God. And I think that's so true yet today. I mean, when we follow God and when we live as God would have us live, our lives are just so much better. But, when we or others, go against and break the laws, things don't go as well. Enough of that chapter anyway. Chapter 29 is the third speech of Moses as to the people, reminding them. So there's probably, a day or two or something between. But he's, again, going to start reminding them of who they are, and whose they are. Not only who they are as Israelites, but they are God's chosen people, and that God has promised them this land. In verse, verse 5, I've led you for 40 years in the wilderness. The clothes on your back, the sandals on your feet have not worn out. Think about that. I mean, I've got some clothes I've had for a long time, and some of them look old and tattered, and some of them are definitely worn out. But 40 years, clothes haven't worn out, shoes haven't worn out. This is because of God. Verse 8, we took their land, we gave it as inheritance, to the Reubenites. Therefore, diligently observe the words of this covenant in order that you may succeed in everything you do. And again, God's promise of blessing if and when they follow and are faithful. Verse 12, to enter into the covenant of the Lord your God, sworn by an oath, which the Lord your God is making with you today. And God is always faithful to his promises. I mean, and we as people we can't be faithful that way. But, verse 14, God speaking, I am making this covenant sworn by an oath, not only with you who stand here, but also with those who are not with us here today. Your future generations, God is saying, I promise you and the future of Israel. And I think about that promise for us, for our children. And, that's why we teach our children about God. That's why we want our children and our grandchildren to know God and to know God's blessings, because life is so much better when God is in it. I mean, it just, and God promises that right here, it's just like honor your father and your mother so that your days in the land may be long. And, and I don't think that God curses. I mean, the rain falls on people who believe in God and people who don't believe in God. God doesn't withhold rain from their land. The blessings are there. And so this is one of the deals, many will say, well, why do you believe in God? The same thing happens to all of us. But the joy that we have with the promise of the resurrection, the promise of life eternal, the promise of forgiveness. I mean, those are the big things for us. And to remain true to God, because we know that God is true to his promises to us.